The human man arrived at her farmstead 3 days before the first snowfall, his horse lame and his supplies stolen by bandits. And Gruktha knew that turning him away meant his death, but keeping him might mean hers. She stood in the doorway of her stone cottage, the autumn wind whipping her dark braid across her shoulders, and studied the stranger with the caution of someone who had learned that mercy often came with a price. He was tall for a human, broad in the shoulders but lean in a way that spoke of hard travel, and his eyes held the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. "I do not ask for charity," he said, his voice hoarse. "I can work. I can pay you back for whatever you give me. I just need shelter until spring. One winter. Nothing more." Gruktha's tusks caught on her lower lip as she considered. She had lived alone on this frontier holding for 3 years, ever since her clan had cast her out for refusing to participate in raids on human settlements. The isolation was safer than the alternative, but it was also lonely in ways she had not anticipated. Still, bringing a human into her home would invite suspicion from both sides if anyone discovered it. The nearest human village was 15 miles south, and they already regarded her with fear and hostility. Her former clan was somewhere in the northern mountains, and they would consider her a traitor twice over. "Why were you traveling alone?" she asked. "I was not. I had 3 companions. We were heading to the northern settlements to work the lumber camps through winter. The bandits killed 2 of them. The third ran. I tried to help the wounded, and by the time I realized I should run too, they had taken everything." He swayed slightly, catching himself against the doorframe. "I understand if you refuse. I know what I am asking." She should refuse. Every logical part of her mind screamed at her to send him away, to give him directions to the village and let that be the end of it. But the snow was coming early this year. She could smell it on the wind, feel it in the ache of old injuries. He would not make it 15 miles before the storm hit. "One winter," she said finally. "You work for your keep. You do not ask questions about my past. You do not tell anyone where you stayed when spring comes." "Agreed." Relief flooded his face. "Agreed. My name is Kieran Voss. Gruktha." She stepped aside to let him enter. "There is a room in the back that stores grain. I will clear it out. You can sleep there." The cottage was small but well built, with thick stone walls and a solid roof that she had repaired herself. The main room served as kitchen and living space, with a large fireplace that she had lined with river stones. Her own bedroom was barely large enough for a bed and a chest of belongings. The storage room she offered him was even smaller, but it had a window and would be warm enough with blankets. Kieran stood awkwardly in the center of the main room, looking around with the careful politeness of someone trying not to offend. Gruktha felt suddenly self-conscious about her home. It was sparse by human standards, she supposed. She had no decorative items, no unnecessary furniture. Everything served a purpose. "Sit," she said, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs at the small table. "You look like you will fall over. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning." She ladled stew from the pot that hung over the fire, thick with venison and root vegetables. He ate with the focused intensity of genuine hunger, and she found herself studying him more carefully. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and eyes that shifted between gray and blue depending on the light. His hands were calloused in the way of someone who worked with tools. Not a farmer exactly, but someone used to physical labor. "You are a carpenter," she guessed. He nodded, swallowing. "My father was. He taught me the trade before he died. I have been traveling for work the past few years, going where the jobs are. There is always work to be done on a farm. I will keep you busy. That is all I ask." The snow came that night, heavy and relentless, confirming her instincts. By morning, the world was white and the temperature had dropped brutally. Kieran woke to find Gruktha already up, feeding the chickens and goats in the small barn attached to the cottage. He joined her without being asked, learning quickly which animals needed what. She appreciated that he did not fill the silence with unnecessary chatter. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Gruktha rose before dawn to tend the animals and check her traps in the nearby woods. Kieran chopped firewood, repaired a section of fence that had been damaged in a storm, and fixed the hinge on the barn door that she had been meaning to address for months. They ate their meals together, but spoke little, both cautious and uncertain of what this arrangement meant. The winter deepened. Snow piled against the walls of the cottage, and the days grew short and brutally cold. Gruktha had prepared well, with stores of grain and preserved meat, barrels of ale she had brewed herself, and root vegetables buried in the cellar. Still, she had prepared for one person, not two, and she found herself calculating how much they could afford to eat each day. Kieran noticed. Of course he noticed. "I am eating your supplies," he said one evening, pushing his half-finished bowl toward her. "You should have turned me away." "Do not be stupid. Eat your food." She pushed the bowl back. "I planned for waste and loss. We will have enough." "Gruktha." His voice was serious. "I mean it. I am grateful, more grateful than I can say." She felt her face grow warm and she looked away. Gratitude made her uncomfortable. It created obligation, expectation. "You are working for your keep." "We agreed." "Still, thank you." The word hung between them, small but significant. Gruktha nodded once sharply and returned to her own meal. As the weeks passed, the initial wariness between them began to ease. Kieran proved himself capable and resourceful, never complaining about the cold or the work. He reinforced the barn's roof, built new shelves in the cottage, and even constructed a clever system for collecting and storing snow melt, so they would have water without having to break the ice on the well. Gruktha found herself looking forward to his presence in the barn each morning, to the quiet companionship of working side by side. One night, as they sat by the fire after supper, Kieran asked, "Why do you live out here alone?" Gruktha stiffened. "I said no questions about my past." "I know." "I am sorry, you do not have to answer." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. "It just seems lonely." "It is safer than the alternative." He did not push further, but she found herself wanting to explain. The silence stretched until she could not bear it. "My clan raids human settlements," she said quietly. "I refuse to participate. They cast me out." She glanced at him, trying to gauge his reaction. "I suppose you think I should have fought for my people regardless of the target." "No." His voice was firm. "I think you made the right choice. Raiding innocent people is wrong, regardless of who does it. Humans have done terrible things to orcs, I know, and that is also wrong, but adding more violence does not fix old violence. It just creates more pain." He met her eyes. "You are brave for standing up to your clan." Gruktha looked away, her throat tight. No one had ever called her brave before. Traitor, yes, weak, soft, but never brave. "Tell me about your father," she said, changing the subject. "You said he was a carpenter." Kieran smiled, and it transformed his face. "He was the best in our village." He could look at a piece of wood and see what it wanted to become. He made furniture for everyone, and never charged more than people could afford. When I was a boy, I would sit in his workshop for hours, watching him work. He said that carpentry was about respect. Respecting the material, respecting the purpose, respecting the person who would use what you made. "He sounds like a good man." He was. "He died when I was 17. Fever took him in just 3 days. Kieran's voice went soft. "My mother had died when I was young, so after that I was alone. I stayed in the village for a few years, took over his work, but it felt empty without him. Eventually I started traveling. I thought maybe I would find something, some place that felt like home again. Have you? He looked at her for a long moment. I am starting to think maybe home is not a place. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Gruktha stood abruptly, busying herself with banking the fire for the night. We should sleep. There is much to do tomorrow. But that night, lying in her bed with the sound of wind howling outside, she found herself thinking about Kieran's words, about bravery and home and the unexpected comfort of his presence. She told herself it meant nothing. That when spring came, he would leave and she would return to her solitary life. It was safer that way. The winter solstice arrived, the longest night of the year. Gruktha had always marked it alone with a small ritual her mother had taught her, lighting candles and offering thanks for making it through the dark half of the year. She debated skipping it this year, not wanting to explain her traditions to Kieran, but the ritual mattered to her in ways she could not quite articulate. She was setting out the candles when Kieran emerged from his room. "What are you doing?" "It is the solstice. The longest night. I always mark it. Can I help?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Light the candles, one for each person who matters to you, living or dead." They worked in silence, lighting small candles and placing them around the room. Gruktha lit one for her mother, dead these 10 years. One for her younger brother, whom she had not seen since the exile. One for an old friend who had tried to defend her decision and been punished for it. She started to stop there, then, almost without thinking, lit a 4th candle. Kieran lit 3. She did not ask who they were for. When all the candles were burning, they sat together in the flickering light. The cottage felt warmer somehow, more alive. Outside, the wind screamed, but inside, there was peace. "This is nice," Kieran said softly. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Gruktha felt that unfamiliar warmth in her chest again, that sense of connection she had been denying for weeks. "You are welcome." They sat until the candles burned low, and when Gruktha finally went to her room, she lay awake for a long time, thinking about the 4th candle she had lit and what it meant. The winter pressed on, brutal and unforgiving. A blizzard trapped them inside for 5 days straight, and they passed the time with conversation that ranged from practical to philosophical. Kieran told her about the places he had traveled, the work he had done, the people he had met. Gruktha found herself sharing stories from her childhood, carefully edited to avoid the most painful parts. They played a dice game she taught him, and he taught her a card game humans favored. They cooked together, experimented with different ways to prepare their limited ingredients, and laughed when a bread experiment went disastrously wrong. Laughter. That was new. Gruktha had not realized how much she missed it. One afternoon, while checking the traps in the woods, Gruktha found fresh tracks. Large tracks. Wolf tracks. A pack had moved into the area, likely driven down from the mountains by the harsh weather. Wolves were dangerous this time of year, desperate and hungry. She would need to be more careful, and she would need to warn Kieran. She returned to the cottage to find him in the barn, examining one of the goats with a worried expression. "Something is wrong," she asked. "This one is limping. I think she has an infection in her hoof." "Do you have anything to treat it?" Gruktha moved closer, running her hands over the goat's leg with practiced efficiency. The animal bleated softly but did not pull away. "Yes, hold her still." She worked quickly, cleaning and treating the infected area while Kieran kept the goat calm. His hands were gentle but firm, and she found herself noticing small details about him. The way he murmured soothingly to the animal, the concentration on his face, the warmth of his arm when it brushed against hers. "There," she said, stepping back. "She will be fine. We will need to check it again in a few days. You are good at this. Healing, I mean. My mother was a healer. She taught me what she could before she died." Gruktha wiped her hands on a rag. "There is a wolf pack nearby. I saw tracks. We will need to make sure the barn is secure at night." Kieran's expression grew serious. "How many?" "At least 6, maybe more. I will reinforce the door, and we should move the chickens inside the cottage at night. They are the most vulnerable." They spent the rest of the day preparing, and that night, Gruktha lay awake listening for any sign of the wolves. Around midnight she heard it, howling in the distance, eerie and wild. She rose, pulled on her heavy cloak, and grabbed her spear. Kieran was already in the main room holding a sturdy staff he had made. "You heard them too. They are still far off, but we should check the animals." They went to the barn together, finding the goats and cow restless but unharmed. The chickens clucked nervously from their crate in the cottage. Gruktha and Kieran took turns keeping watch through the night, and though the wolves never came close, their presence was a reminder of how fragile safety could be. Over the next week, the wolves became bolder. One night, they tried to break into the barn, and only Gruktha's quick response with her spear drove them off. Another time, she found a yearling goat killed in the far pasture, dragged partially away before something had scared the wolves off. The losses were manageable but concerning. If the pack continued to hunt near the farm, they would lose more animals. "We need to deal with this," Kieran said one morning. "Hunt the pack before they do more damage." Gruktha shook her head. "Too dangerous. Wolf packs are smart. They hunt in coordination. So we coordinate too, you and me." She looked at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. He was not a warrior, but he was capable, and he was right. They could not afford to lose more animals. "We set a trap," she said slowly. "Use one of the dead carcasses as bait. Build a blind where we can hide and wait." They spent 2 days preparing, building a sturdy blind in the woods near where Gruktha had been finding kills. They took turns watching through the long, cold hours, seeing nothing but rabbit tracks and a lone fox. On the 3rd night, just after sunset, the wolves came. Gruktha counted 7 of them, lean and gray against the snow. The alpha was a massive male with a scarred muzzle. He approached the bait cautiously, testing the air. Gruktha nocked an arrow, her breathing steady. Beside her, Kieran held a spear, his knuckles white on the shaft. The alpha lunged forward, and chaos erupted. Gruktha's first arrow took one wolf in the shoulder. Her second hit another in the flank. The pack scattered, but the alpha turned toward the blind, snarling. Kieran stepped forward, putting himself between Gruktha and the charging wolf. The spear caught the alpha in the chest, but the momentum carried the wolf forward. It crashed into Kieran, and they went down in a tangle of limbs and fur. Gruktha threw her bow aside and grabbed her own spear, driving it into the alpha's side. The wolf yelped and released Kieran, staggering back. She struck again, and this time the animal fell and did not rise. The rest of the pack fled into the darkness. Gruktha dropped to her knees beside Kieran. "Are you hurt?" He pushed himself up, breathing hard. "I do not think so, maybe some bruises." He looked at the dead wolf, then at her. "Is it over? For now. With the alpha dead, the pack will move on." She helped him to his feet, her hands shaking slightly with the aftermath of adrenaline. "You should not have put yourself in front of it. It was going to attack you. I have armor and experience. You do not. I was not going to let you face it alone." His voice was firm, and when she met his eyes, she saw something there that made her breath catch. "We are in this together, Gruktha. You and me." She wanted to argue, to push him away, to protect herself from the vulnerability of caring. But standing there in the snow, with the smell of blood and the sound of her own racing heart, she could not deny what she was feeling anymore. "We should get inside," she said quietly, "before we freeze." They dragged the alpha's carcass back to the cottage, and Gruktha began the process of skinning and preparing it. The fur would make warm blankets, and the meat would supplement their stores. Kieran helped, following her instructions without complaint, even though his hands were clumsy with the unfamiliar work. "You did well tonight," she said as they worked. "Killing a wolf is not easy." I was terrified. That is the point. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it. He smiled at that, and she found herself smiling back. The moment felt significant somehow, a shift in the dynamic between them that she could not quite name. The winter continued, but something had changed. The partnership they had built through necessity had deepened into genuine friendship, and something more. Gruktha caught herself watching Kieran when he worked, admiring the efficient way he moved, the focus he brought to each task. She noticed the way he looked at her too, his gaze lingering when he thought she was not paying attention. Neither of them spoke of it. The agreement had been clear: one winter, nothing more. When spring came, he would leave, and that would be that. To acknowledge what was growing between them would only make the inevitable parting harder. But then came the day that changed everything. Gruktha had gone to check her trap lines alone, wanting to give Kieran time to work on a project he had been planning. She was returning with 2 rabbits when she heard voices. Human voices. Male. Rough. She moved silently through the trees, using skills her father had taught her when she was young. 3 men stood near the edge of her property, looking at the cottage. They were armed and had the look of trouble about them. "Think that orc lives alone?" one of them asked. "Worth finding out. Could be supplies inside, or something worth taking." Gruktha's blood ran cold. Kieran was in the cottage. If these men went inside, if they found him with her, they would kill him for fraternizing with an orc. Or worse, they would assume he was her prisoner. She needed to lead them away to protect Kieran and the farm. She stepped deliberately on a branch, letting it crack loudly. All 3 men spun toward the sound. "There," one of them hissed. "In the trees." Gruktha let them see her just for a moment, then turned and ran deeper into the woods. Behind her, she heard them crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. Good. They were following her. She led them on a winding path away from the cottage, using every trick she knew to stay ahead. But there were 3 of them, and they were fresh while she had already walked miles in the cold. One of them got ahead of her somehow, stepping out from behind a tree to block her path. She tried to dodge, but another grabbed her from behind. She fought, landing a solid kick that sent one man sprawling, but the third hit her across the back of the head with something heavy. The world spun and she fell. When she woke, she was lying in the snow, her hands bound behind her back. The 3 men stood nearby, arguing. "We should just kill her and be done with it, and waste the bounty. There is a standing reward for captured orcs. We can get good coin for her. That means dragging her all the way to the garrison. Better than nothing. Come on, help me get her up." Gruktha's head throbbed, and when she tried to move, pain lanced through her skull. They hauled her to her feet, and she swayed, struggling to focus. This was bad. If they took her to the garrison, she would be executed or enslaved. There would be no trial, no chance to explain. But then she heard something that made her heart stop. "Hey, look at this." One of the men was holding up a piece of cloth. Kieran's scarf, which he must have dropped when he was working outside. "Think there is someone else around here. Let us check the cottage. Could be more loot." No, no. They could not find Kieran. Gruktha tried to fight again, desperate now, but one of the men clubbed her across the face. She tasted blood. "Stay down, orc." They started toward the cottage, dragging her with them. She struggled every step, trying to slow them, to warn Kieran somehow. But it was useless. They were too strong and she was too dazed. They were 50 yards from the cottage when the door opened. Kieran stepped out, carrying an axe. He took in the scene in an instant, and his expression hardened into something Gruktha had never seen before. "Let her go," he said, his voice cold. The men stopped. "You her prisoner," one of them called. "We are here to help, friend." "She is not my captor. She is my friend. Let her go." "Your friend," the man laughed. "You are sympathizing with an orc. That is a crime, you know." "The only crime I see here is assault. Release her, or what? There are 3 of us and one of you." Kieran hefted the axe. "I killed an alpha wolf 2 weeks ago. What do you think I can do to you?" The men exchanged glances. They still had numbers on their side, but Kieran looked dangerous in a way that gave them pause. Gruktha could see the calculation in their eyes. Was she worth the fight? "This is not over," one of them said finally. "We will report this. You will regret protecting an orc. You know where to find me." The man holding Gruktha shoved her forward and she fell hard. Before she could get up, Kieran was there, cutting her bonds with a knife. The 3 men backed away, then turned and disappeared into the woods. "Are you hurt?" Kieran asked, his hands gentle as he examined the cut on her face. "I will be fine. You should not have done that. Now they will tell the authorities. They will come for you. Let them come. I am not letting anyone hurt you." He helped her stand, supporting her weight when she swayed. "Come on. Let us get you inside." In the cottage, he cleaned her wounds and made her sit by the fire while he prepared willow bark tea for the pain. Gruktha watched him move around the small space, feeling a strange mix of emotions: gratitude, fear, and something deeper that she had been trying to ignore. "Kieran," she said quietly, "you should leave, now, before this gets worse. If the authorities come and find you here with me, they will arrest you, maybe worse." He brought her the tea and sat down across from her. "I am not leaving. You have to. This was only supposed to be 1 winter. The agreement was clear. You would work for your keep, and when spring came, you would go. That is still months away, but you need to leave now before this ruins your life. No, do not be stupid. You saw those men. They will report you for harboring an orc, for defending me. That is a serious crime in human lands. I do not care. You should care. Your freedom, your future, everything you have worked for could be destroyed." "Gruktha." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Do you want me to leave?" The question hung between them, sharp and unavoidable. Gruktha opened her mouth to say yes, to lie, to protect him, but she could not force the words out. "What I want does not matter," she said instead. "What matters is keeping you safe. That is not an answer. Kieran, I am not leaving unless you tell me to go. Unless you look me in the eye and say you want me gone." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because the truth is, I do not want to leave. I do not want spring to come. I do not want to go back to traveling alone, to empty nights and temporary lodgings. I want to stay here. With you." Gruktha felt tears prick her eyes, a sensation so unfamiliar it took her a moment to recognize it. "You do not know what you are saying. This is gratitude talking, loneliness. I am in love with you." The words stopped her cold. She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "You cannot be," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because you are an orc and I am human. Because society says we should not care for each other." He reached out, taking her hand. "I know what I feel. I have known for weeks, maybe longer. Every day with you has been a gift. Your strength, your kindness, your humor, the way you care for your animals, the way you make me feel safe and understood. I love you, Gruktha, and I am not going anywhere." She should pull away. She should be strong, practical, logical. But instead she tightened her grip on his hand. "I love you too," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself from the pain of losing you, but I do. I love you." Kieran smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. He moved closer, reaching up to cup her face gently, mindful of her injuries. "Then let me stay, not as a guest or a worker, as your partner, your equal. Whatever comes, we will face it together. They will come after us. Humans and orcs both. So we will be ready. We have survived this winter together. We can survive anything." Gruktha let out a shaky laugh. "You are very stubborn. So are you. I think that is why we work." She kissed him then, closing the distance between them. It was gentle and tentative at first, both of them learning the shape of each other. Then deeper, months of denied feelings pouring into that single moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, Gruktha rested her forehead against his. "I am scared," she admitted. "Me too. But I would rather be scared with you than safe alone." They sat together by the fire for a long time, hands entwined, making quiet plans for an uncertain future. The agreement had been one winter, nothing more. But somewhere along the way, they had both stopped counting the days until spring and started imagining what it might be like if winter never ended. The next morning, Gruktha woke to find Kieran already up, his pack open on the table. For a moment, panic seized her. Had he changed his mind? Was he leaving after all? Then she saw what he was doing. He was unpacking, taking out his few possessions and finding places for them in the cottage. A spare shirt hung on a peg near the fire, his whetstone and tools arranged on a shelf, his blanket folded at the foot of her bed. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "I figured if I am staying, I should stop living out of a pack." Gruktha felt warmth bloom in her chest. "That makes sense." They fell into a new rhythm after that. It was not dramatically different from before, but there was an ease to it now, an acknowledgement of what they meant to each other. They worked side by side, talked late into the night, and stole moments of affection when the work was done. Kieran kissed her good night before they retired to separate rooms, though Gruktha suspected that would not last long, but the threat of the three men hung over them. Days passed with no sign of trouble, but Gruktha knew it was only a matter of time. She and Kieran prepared as best they could, stockpiling weapons and planning escape routes. If soldiers came, they would not be taken easily. 2 weeks after the encounter in the woods, riders approached the farm. 4 men in the livery of the regional garrison. Gruktha and Kieran met them in the yard, standing side by side. The lead soldier, a grizzled man with sergeant stripes, looked them over with tired eyes. "You Kieran Voss?" "I am." "There has been a complaint filed. 3 men claim you are harboring an orc criminal and threaten them with violence. The orc is Gruktha. She owns this land legally and has broken no laws. The 3 men attacked her and dragged her through the woods bound. I stopped them. If anyone is a criminal, it is them." The sergeant sighed. "That is not how they tell it." "I am sure it is not, but it is the truth." The sergeant looked at Gruktha. "You have papers for this land." She did. Her mother had purchased it before the tensions between humans and orcs had escalated, and the deed was legal even if rarely enforced anymore. She went inside and returned with the document, yellowed with age but valid. The sergeant examined it, then handed it back. "Looks legitimate." He turned to Kieran. "You hear of your own free will. I am. Gruktha saved my life when I showed up half-frozen and starving. I stayed to work through the winter. Now I am staying because I choose to. You understand what people will say, what they will think. I do not care what they think." The sergeant studied them both for a long moment. Then, to Gruktha's surprise, he smiled slightly. "Good for you. My wife is from the southern tribes. I know what it is like to love someone the world says you should not." He turned to his men. "Nothing to see here. Let us go." One of the younger soldiers protested. "But Sergeant, the complaint is clearly false. Move out." They rode away, and Gruktha let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Kieran took her hand. "That went better than expected," he said. "Yes, but others will come. If not soldiers, then bounty hunters or zealots. Then we will deal with them too, together." The weeks that followed were tense but peaceful. Word of the sergeant's decision spread, and to Gruktha's surprise, it seemed to provide them with a small measure of protection. Not acceptance exactly, but a grudging tolerance. The nearby village still regarded them with suspicion, but no more attacks came. Winter began to loosen its grip. The days grew incrementally longer and the snow started to melt in patches. Spring was coming, creeping closer with each sunrise. By their original agreement, this was when Kieran should leave. One winter, they had said. Nothing more, but neither of them mentioned it. Instead, they worked on expanding the farm. Kieran built a proper workshop for himself, planning to offer his carpentry services to nearby settlements. Gruktha cleared new fields for planting, envisioning a larger operation. They were building something together, a life that went beyond temporary shelter. One morning in early spring, Gruktha woke to find the world transformed. The last of the snow had melted overnight, revealing brown earth and the first brave shoots of green. The air smelled different, warmer, full of promise. Spring had arrived. She found Kieran in the barn, repairing a saddle they had found in an old trunk. He looked up when she entered and his expression was cautious. "It is the first thaw," she said. "Yes, the winter is over." "Technically, yes." He set down the saddle. "Are you asking me to leave?" Gruktha crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "No. I am saying we should acknowledge that our agreement is fulfilled. You stayed one winter. You worked for your keep. By the terms we set, you are free to go. But I hope you will choose to stay anyway. Not because of an agreement or obligation, but because you want to, because this is home." Kieran pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "This is home. You are home. I am not going anywhere, Gruktha, not today, not tomorrow, not ever." They kissed, and it felt like a promise, like a new beginning. That evening they sat on the porch watching the sun set, the air warm enough for the first time in months that they did not need cloaks. Gruktha leaned against Kieran's shoulder, feeling more content than she ever had. "I need to tell you something," Kieran said. She looked up at him. "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a carved wooden ring, simple but beautifully made. "I have been working on this for weeks. I wanted to wait until spring to give it to you, to ask you properly." He took her hand. "Gruktha, will you marry me? I know it will not be legal in most places and our life will not be easy. But I want to spend every day with you. I want to build a future together. Will you have me?" Gruktha stared at the ring, her throat tight with emotion. Marriage between an orc and a human was not recognized in any official capacity she knew of. It would be symbolic at best and dangerous at worst, marking them both as rebels against social norms. But looking at Kieran, at the hope and love in his eyes, she knew her answer. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed again, deeper this time, and when they pulled apart they were both laughing. "We should have a ceremony," Kieran said. "Nothing fancy, just something to mark the occasion." "Tomorrow," Gruktha decided. "We will make our vows tomorrow." They spent the next day preparing. Gruktha dug out her mother's best blanket, woven in the traditional patterns of her clan. Kieran picked wildflowers from the newly thawed fields, the first blooms of spring. They had no officiant, no witnesses, but it did not matter. This was for them. As the sun began to set, they stood together in the place where they had first met, in the doorway of the cottage. Gruktha wore a simple dress she had made herself. Kieran wore his best shirt. They held hands and spoke their vows. "I promise to stand by your side," Kieran said. "In good times and bad, in safety and danger. I promise to respect you, to support your dreams, and to love you every day of my life. You are my home, Gruktha, my family, my everything." Gruktha's voice shook as she spoke. "I promise to trust you, to let you into my heart even when I am scared. I promise to build a life with you, to face whatever comes together. You have given me hope when I thought I had none. You have shown me that I am worthy of love. I will cherish that gift always." They exchanged the rings then. Gruktha had made one for Kieran as well, carved from a piece of antler and inlaid with a design that represented unity in her culture. They kissed as husband and wife, and though no law recognized their union, it felt more real than anything Gruktha had ever known. That night, they did not sleep in separate rooms. Kieran carried Gruktha to bed, and they consummated their marriage with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt a peace she had never thought possible. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two people who had found each other against all odds. The next morning, Gruktha woke early as always, but for once she did not get up immediately. She lay there watching Kieran sleep, tracing the line of his jaw with her eyes. He was hers. She was his. They had chosen each other, and that choice felt like the bravest thing she had ever done. When he woke, he smiled at her. "Good morning, wife. Good morning, husband." The words felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. They rose and began their day, but there was a lightness to everything now. The work felt easier, the morning brighter. They were building something that mattered, something that would last. A week after their wedding, Gruktha was working in the garden when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up tense, but relaxed when she recognized the rider. It was the sergeant from the garrison, alone this time. He dismounted and approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. "I apologize for the intrusion." "What do you want?" Gruktha asked, not unkindly. "To warn you. There is a group of human extremists moving through the region. They have been attacking mixed households, places where humans and orcs live together. I thought you should know." Gruktha felt ice in her veins. "How many?" "At least a dozen. Maybe more. They are well armed and organized. I have men hunting them, but they are slippery." He looked genuinely concerned. "You might want to consider leaving for a while, going somewhere safer. This is our home." "I understand, but if they come here, we will defend it." The sergeant nodded slowly. "I figured you would say that. If you need help, send word to the garrison." "I cannot promise much, but I will do what I can." "Thank you." He mounted his horse. "Be safe, both of you." After he left, Gruktha told Kieran what she had learned. His expression turned grim. "We need to prepare. Really prepare. Traps, fortifications, escape plans." They spent the next 3 days turning the farm into a defensible position. Kieran's carpentry skills proved invaluable as he built reinforced shutters for the windows and a barricade for the door. Gruktha set traps in the woods around the property, simple but effective. They stockpiled weapons and supplies in multiple locations, in case they needed to flee quickly. On the 4th day, the extremists came. Gruktha saw them approaching at midday, a group of 15 men on horseback, all armed with swords and torches. She had been expecting them, watching from the tree line, and she ran back to warn Kieran. "They are here." He grabbed his bow. "Stay inside, I will try to talk to them." "Absolutely not. We face them together." They took up positions on either side of the door, weapons ready. The riders stopped 50 feet from the cottage, and their leader, a man with a scarred face and cold eyes, called out, "We know there is an orc here. Send her out and the human can live." "This is private property," Kieran shouted back. "Leave now and we will not press charges." The leader laughed. "Charges? Boy, we are the law here. We are cleaning up this land, purging it of monsters and the race traders who protect them. Last chance. Send out the orc or we burn you both." Gruktha stepped into view, her spear ready. "I am here. Come and take me if you can." The leader's expression darkened. "So be it." The extremists charged. Gruktha and Kieran opened fire with their bows, and 2 men fell before the group reached the cottage. Then it was chaos. Gruktha's traps caught 3 more, and the screams of injured horses filled the air. The remaining men dismounted and attacked on foot. Kieran fought with his staff, using it to keep attackers at bay. Gruktha wielded her spear with deadly precision, years of training taking over. They protected each other's backs, moving in sync like they had been fighting together for years instead of months. But they were outnumbered. One man got past Gruktha's guard and slashed at Kieran, opening a cut on his arm. Another lunged at her from the side, and she barely deflected the blow. They were being overwhelmed. Then, miraculously, horns sounded in the distance. The sergeant and his men thundered into the clearing, swords drawn. The extremists broke and ran, and the soldiers pursued. Within minutes, it was over. The sergeant dismounted, surveying the scene. "You two all right?" "We will survive," Gruktha said, breathing hard. "Good. We have been tracking these bastards for days. Thank you for slowing them down." He looked at the bodies and injured men. "This should be enough to convince the regional governor to take the threat seriously. You did well." After the soldiers left, taking the prisoners with them, Gruktha and Kieran tended to each other's wounds. Kieran's arm was bad enough to need stitches, which Gruktha performed with steady hands. "That was too close," he said. "Yes, but we won. We defended our home. Together. Always together." The attack had consequences. Word spread of the battle, of the human and orc who had fought side by side against extremists. Some people condemned them, calling them unnatural and dangerous, but others were inspired. Over the next few weeks, 3 other mixed couples reached out, seeking advice and solidarity. A network began to form, small but growing. Spring turned to summer and the farm flourished. Gruktha's crops grew strong, and Kieran's carpentry business attracted clients from as far as 3 towns away. They were not wealthy, but they were stable. More than that, they were happy. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Kieran said, "Do you ever regret it, choosing this life?" Gruktha considered the question. A year ago, she had been alone, exiled, certain she would live out her days in isolation. Now she had a partner, a home that felt truly alive, and a future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. "No," she said. "Not for a moment, me neither." He kissed her temple. "Though I do wonder sometimes." "About what?" "About what would have happened if those bandits had not attacked my caravan, if I had made it to the lumber camps like I planned. Would I have ever found you? I think we would have found each other eventually. Somehow." "You think fate is real?" "I think we make our own fate. And we chose each other. That is more powerful than any destiny." As autumn approached, bringing with it cooler nights and the first hints of color in the leaves, Gruktha found herself thinking about the calendar. It hung in the kitchen, marking off the days, and she had been dutifully noting each one. But looking at it now, she realized something. The winter was coming again. Their second winter together, and she wanted many more after that. Decades of winters, springs, summers, and falls. A lifetime of seasons with Kieran by her side. She took the calendar down and tucked it away in a drawer. Kieran noticed, of course. "What are you doing?" "We do not need it anymore. We are not counting days until an end. We are building a life." He smiled, that brilliant smile that still made her heart race. "I like that. No more counting." "No more counting," she agreed. That night, as they lay in bed, Gruktha thought about how far they had come. From strangers bound by a temporary agreement to partners, spouses, and best friends. From surviving to thriving. From one trial winter to forever. "Kieran," she whispered, "thank you for being brave enough to stay." He pulled her closer. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms as the first cool winds of autumn whispered through the trees outside. The world was still uncertain, still dangerous in many ways, but they had each other, And that was enough. The second winter came, and it was easier than the first. They were prepared, well-stocked, and most importantly, they faced it together without the pretense of impermanence. When the snows were deepest, they spent long evenings by the fire, talking and dreaming about the future. "I want to build a bigger barn," Kieran said one night. "If we are going to expand the livestock, we will need more space. And I want to plant an orchard. Apple trees, maybe some pears. My mother always said fruit trees were a sign of faith in the future. Then we will do both. We have time." Time. They had all the time in the world now. The winter solstice came again, and they lit candles as they had the year before. But this time, Gruktha lit 5 candles instead of 4, one for her mother, one for her brother, one for her old friend, one for Kieran's father, and one for the life they were building together. "What does the 5th one represent?" Kieran asked. "Us, our marriage, our future, everything we have become." He lit a 5th candle of his own. "For the same, for us." They sat in the candlelight, and Gruktha felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of struggle or fear, but the presence of love and purpose and hope. "I am glad we met," she said softly. "So am I. Best thing that ever happened to me, freezing half to death on your doorstep," she laughed. "You are ridiculous. Maybe. But I am yours. Yes, you are mine and I am yours." The candles burned down slowly, and outside the wind howled. But inside the cottage there was warmth and light and love. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other every day since, sat together in perfect peace. Spring came again, as it always did. The snow melted, the earth softened, and new life pushed up through the soil. Gruktha planted her orchard, 15 young trees that would take years to bear fruit, but represented faith in the future. Kieran built the new barn, larger and sturdier than the old one. They worked side by side as they always did, building something that would last. One day, as they were taking a break from planting, sitting in the shade of the cottage and drinking cool water, a group of riders approached. Gruktha tensed, but Kieran put a calming hand on her arm. "Wait. Look." The riders carried no weapons that she could see, and they approached slowly, respectfully. As they got closer, Gruktha saw that they were a mixed group. Humans and orcs traveling together, the lead rider, a human woman, dismounted and bowed. "Are you Gruktha and Kieran Voss?" "We are," Kieran said cautiously. "We have been searching for you. We heard about what you did, standing up to the extremists. About your farm, how you live together in peace. We want to learn from you. We want to build something similar." Gruktha and Kieran exchanged glances. This was unexpected. "Who are you?" Gruktha asked. "My name is Renata Marsh. This is my partner Durgash." She gestured to the orc woman beside her. "There are more of us scattered across the region. Mixed couples, families, people who are tired of the hatred and violence. We want to create a community. A place where we can live without fear. We heard you might help." Gruktha felt something stir in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose. "We can try, but we are just 2 people. We do not have all the answers." "You have more than most. You have shown it is possible. That is enough." Over the next few weeks, more people came. Humans and orcs who wanted to live in peace, to build relationships without fear of persecution. They camped near the farm while Gruktha and Kieran helped them plan their own homesteads, offered advice on crops and construction, and shared their experiences. It was exhausting and exhilarating. Gruktha found herself taking on a leadership role she had never expected, and to her surprise, she was good at it. Kieran's carpentry skills were in high demand, and he trained others in the craft. They were no longer isolated. They were part of something bigger. By summer, a small community had formed. 5 homesteads within a few miles of each other, all occupied by mixed families or partnerships. They helped each other with harvests, shared resources, and protected one another. It was not perfect. There were disagreements and challenges. But it was real and growing. One evening, as Gruktha surveyed the land from a hilltop, Kieran joined her. He slipped his arm around her waist, and they stood together watching the sun set over the valley. "We did this," he said. "You and me. We started something that matters. We just wanted to live in peace. This happened because others were brave enough to do the same. Still, I am proud of us, of what we have built." Gruktha leaned into him. "Me too. Though sometimes I miss it being just us. We can still have that. Our home is still ours. But now we also have a community. People who understand what we face. That is valuable." "Yes, it is." She turned to look at him. "Do you ever think about what you would be doing if you had not come here, if you had made it to the lumber camps sometimes?" "I would probably still be drifting, working temporary jobs, never staying long enough to put down roots. I would be alive but not really living." He kissed her softly. "This is living. With you building this life, being part of something meaningful, this is what I was searching for all along. I just did not know it. I did not know it either. I thought isolation was the only way to stay safe, but you showed me that safety without connection is just a different kind of prison." They stood together until the stars came out, bright and clear in the summer sky. The world was vast and uncertain, but in that moment, everything felt right. As the years passed, the community continued to grow. Children were born, the first generation to grow up in a place where mixed relationships were normal. Gruktha and Kieran became elders of sorts, respected for their experience and wisdom. They never sought power or authority, but people came to them for advice, and they gave it freely. Their farm remained the heart of their world. They expanded it over time, added more animals, more crops, a proper workshop for Kieran. But the cottage itself stayed the same, small and cozy, filled with memories of that first difficult winter when they had found each other. On their 5th anniversary, Kieran gave Gruktha a gift. It was the calendar, the one she had hidden away years before. He had found it and done something remarkable with it. He had turned it into a book, each page decorated with notes and drawings commemorating the moments of their life together. "I found it in the drawer," he explained. "And I thought about that first winter, how we were both counting days until it ended. How you hid the calendar when you decided we did not need an end date anymore. It felt important, so I turned it into something that celebrates where we have been instead of counting down to something ending." Gruktha flipped through the pages, tears streaming down her face. There were sketches of the farm, of them working together, of the wedding they had held. Notes about funny moments, difficult days, victories, and struggles. It was their story, lovingly documented. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," she whispered. "You gave me my life back. This seemed appropriate." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that single gesture. They had come so far from that desperate agreement on a freezing autumn day. One trial winter and nothing more. But they had hidden the calendar, chosen each other, and built a life that neither could have imagined. 10 years after Kieran first stumbled onto Gruktha's farm, they stood together at the same spot where they had met. The cottage had been expanded, the farm prosperous, and the community around them thriving. But the essence of their relationship, the core of what they had built, remained unchanged. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Gruktha asked. "I said a lot of things. I was half frozen and desperate. You said you needed shelter until spring, one winter, nothing more," Kieran smiled. "I did say that. I had no idea what I was really asking for." "What were you asking for?" "A home. A future. Love, everything I had been searching for without knowing it." He took her hands. "That winter changed my life. You changed my life. You changed mine too. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my days alone. You showed me another way. They kissed, and it felt like coming home, like every kiss they had shared over the years, familiar and precious. That night they sat by the fire as they had so many times before. The cottage was quiet, peaceful. Outside, the world continued its eternal cycle of seasons and change. But inside, there was constancy. There was love. "I never thanked you properly," Kieran said suddenly. "For what?" "For hiding the calendar. For deciding that what we had was worth more than the agreement we made. That took courage." Gruktha smiled. "I was terrified. I thought maybe you would be angry, that you would think I was trying to trap you. I would never have thought that. I know that now. But then I was still learning to trust, to believe that someone could choose me not out of obligation or necessity, but because they genuinely wanted to. I did want to. I do want to. Every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. The fire crackled, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. It was an ordinary night, unremarkable in most ways. But to Gruktha and Kieran it was perfect. "I love you," Gruktha said softly. "I love you too." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything they had built together. A life, a home, a community, a future. All because one desperate man had asked for shelter, and one lonely woman had been brave enough to say yes. One trial winter and nothing more, they had agreed. But by the first thaw, the orc woman had hidden the calendar, and in doing so had opened the door to forever. They grew old together, as people do when they are lucky enough to find true love. Their hands became weathered, their hair gray, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, mellowing like good wine into something richer and more complex than it had been in those early days of passion and uncertainty. They never regretted their choice. Not on the hard days when prejudice reared its ugly head. Not when they lost friends to violence or illness. Not even when the world seemed determined to tear them apart. They had each other, and that was enough to face anything. On a spring morning in their 20th year together, Gruktha woke to find Kieran already up, standing in the doorway of the cottage and looking out at the farm. She joined him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am. How different my life could have been if not for a series of accidents and choices that led me here." "Fate," Gruktha said with a smile. "Maybe. Or maybe just the universe being kind for once." He turned to her. "Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate stranger all those years ago. Thank you for being worth the risk." They stood together in the doorway, watching the sun rise over the land they had cultivated together. The orchards Gruktha had planted were mature now, heavy with blossoms that would become fruit. The barn Kieran had built stood strong and sturdy. The community they had helped create stretched out around them, a patchwork of farms and families living in peace. It was not the life either of them had expected, but it was the life they had chosen, and it was more than either of them had dared to dream. One trial winter and nothing more, they had agreed. But love has a way of making liars of us all. By the first thaw, the orc woman had hidden the calendar, and in that simple act of hope and defiance, she had ensured that their winter would last forever. Not as a season of cold and hardship, but as the foundation upon which they built a lifetime of springs, summers, and autumns. Together. Always together. And that, in the end, was everything.